guys, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my IVF prep month video. I feel like this video is important to make because when I was doing a lot of research on the IVF process, I found a lot of stories and videos about the actual process, the injections and all of that, all of the doctor's appointments, but not necessarily all of the stuff that goes into it beforehand. In my case, I had several months of prepping to do before I was even approved to do an IVF cycle. Obviously, this is going to be different for everyone depending on what testing you've had done, what your history is, what your diagnosis of infertility is. Different clinics might have different requirements, so your prep month might look nothing like mine. Yours might take 3 weeks. Mine took a couple of months, and I feel like we've had a lot of testing done and we feel very confident that IVF was the route that we needed to take at this point. We have had a hard journey leading up to this point, and I am so ready to get started, you guys. Like I am so ready. I want this video to be as informative as possible, so I'm going to tell you all of the testing that we had done and even our results, which is personal, but I also think that when you're watching these videos, you kind of want to find people who maybe have similar diagnoses to you, or maybe you're just curious why different people are choosing to do or need to do IVF. Before I get into all of that, I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and a very, very on point sponsor for this specific video, and that is Ritual Prenatal Vitamins. I have compared them to other prenatal vitamins, specifically the amount of folate in this. That is just one reason why I love this prenatal and why I'm trusting this prenatal to see me through one of the scariest and most expensive things that we are doing in order to have another baby. And I just have so much hope right now, you guys. I feel like I'm just in a really good place, especially compared to where I was in January through April. I've been on prenatals for a very long time now, so it has built up nicely in my system, but you do want to start it before you actually start trying to conceive. So this is the Ritual Essential Prenatal. 2 easy to take capsules provide both you and your baby with 12 essential nutrients before and during pregnancy. They have a delayed release capsule, which is easy on your stomach, which is great, especially when you're pregnant, and a citrus tab inside to keep everything nice and fresh. It's vegan friendly, allergen free, gluten free, non-GMO, and it has no added sugars. In addition to the prenatal vitamin, they also have just a general women's and men multivitamin. They have a 50+, a teen version, and a postnatal version. It's delivered straight to your door every month via a subscription with no strings attached. It's just over $1 a day for your 12 essential nutrients for yourself and your baby. And they just launched their new essential protein powder, which I did a sponsorship in a different video. Love it. Definitely check that out as well. So if you're trying for a baby, you're pregnant, you just had a baby, you're a woman, you're a man, you're a teen, you're over 50, there's a vitamin for all of you guys. And Ritual is hooking you guys up with 10% off your first 3 months if you go to ritual.com/10L and use the code 10L for 10% off your first 3 months. Again, great deal. Love you, Ritual. Thank you for working with me yet again. I absolutely stand behind your product. I am proud to promote you. I'm proud to work with you. So yeah, thank you. Okay, let's get into this video. We are gonna talk about all the stuff that comes before you're approved to do IVF, which let me just tell you this. When I first went into my consult appointment, which is the very first thing you do, whether you're already with the clinic like I was or you're a brand new patient, the first thing you're gonna do is go and meet with the doctor. For me, it was in person because I live here. I do think that if you're using a clinic that is out of state, a lot of people have to travel to their clinics. You would do this meeting via video or phone call. I left that appointment thinking it was going to be a 3-month process. 1 month for prep, 1 month for the retrieval, 1 month for the transfer, unless you're doing a fresh transfer, which I am not doing. And I'm not gonna lie, I thought that that was really long. I was kind of like, this is just so sad. I had done that meeting pretty shortly after I had gone through everything with my ectopic pregnancy, and I knew that I wasn't ready to jump into it right away. I wanted to go ahead and get this consult appointment going. I wanted to go ahead and start working on all of my prereqs so that when I was ready, which I knew that I wasn't at that point, I knew that I needed several months, not just to heal physically from my surgery, but to heal my heart and to get in a better headspace. And I did my whole health video where I talked about how I wanted to lose weight. I've actually lost 9 pounds so far. So that's a complete side note, and I'm gonna do another fitness update video. But you know, I just wanted to focus on other things and just let my heart, my brain, and my body heal. And even still, I walked out of there thinking, so even when I'm ready, it's gonna take 3 months. Like for me, that just felt so long. And it's crazy because if you think about it, we've been trying for a baby for over 2 years. And so 3 months should seem really, you know, fast and exciting. But in that moment, I just felt like it was just gonna take so long. So that appointment was about an hour long. It was with both Alex and I, and we sat down with the doctor, and he basically did a Cliff Notes version of the IVF process. He actually went into it a little bit more detailed than I expected him to. Alex was very new to a lot of the concepts. I've done a lot of research, so I did know most of what he was saying, but he went through his recommendations for us as a couple, which I will get into later, but I'll go ahead and say now so that you kind of know the rundown of the appointment. He told us that he highly recommends genetic testing. It's PGTA for us because we know that we had a chromosomal abnormality with my January loss. A paternal triploidy. And because of that specific chromosomal loss, which was 2 sperms getting into 1 egg, he also recommended doing ICSI, which is where they put 1 sperm in the egg. They don't just like put them in a dish and let them do their thing naturally. Both of these items are an added cost. We did walk into the consult knowing that we had already decided we did want to do the genetic testing, but ICSI was not something that we had really thought about or considered because we have a no male factor infertility. So ICSI wasn't something that we were thinking about because ICSI is typically for male factor infertility. If you have a low count, if you have low morphology, low mobility, like any of them, then ICSI can be really good for you because you don't have to have the most like robust, strong, lots of it swimmers in order to fertilize the eggs. But another thing my doctor told me, which I did not know, is that his clinic highly recommends that if you're going to do the genetic testing, to also do ICSI along with it. I had never heard of it being recommended as a package like that. I actually asked him, why do you recommend it for genetic testing? Because I have followed a lot of people who have done genetic testing and not done ICSI. And he said that in his opinion, and with the current scientific data out there, his clinic believes that if you are going to biopsy some cells from an embryo that has been in a dish with a bunch of different sperm, there is a chance that you're actually going to get remnants of some of the other sperm that's not actually the one that's fertilizing that egg. Apparently, when all of the sperm start going towards the egg, when there's a bunch, when you're doing traditional fertilization, the sperm that aren't lucky enough to be the first one kind of gets stuck to the sides of the egg, and it can either be fragments or the entire thing. And so when you're biopsying the embryo for genetic testing, there's a chance that you could actually be getting DNA from a sperm that's not the actual one that you're trying to detect. So I had literally never heard of that. I feel like my mind was blown in that moment. When you think of mosaic embryos, obviously mosaic embryos happen no matter how you fertilize things, but I'm wondering if some mosaic embryos are maybe from these remnants of sperm that's getting into the genetic testing. Again, I'm not a doctor. Please do not take anything that I'm saying right now as fact. Talk to your doctor, do your own research. This is what I was recommended. And as a first-time IVF patient, I do choose to trust my doctor on this. So we are doing PGTA testing. We do not need the other 2 types of genetic testing. There is one that can test for specific disorders if you are a carrier, which you do need to do carrier screening, which I'll get into. And then there's one that looks for, I think, translocation, which would specifically be more of an issue, I believe, if you have something wrong with your karyotyping, which we also got tested. So now that I kind of have that said, I'll go into all of the testing that we had done, what was required and what we chose to do. Okay, so in terms of the testing, the very first thing that you're going to need to get tested if you start working with a fertility clinic is your day 3 lab work. This is blood work that's taken on day 3 of your period. So your cycle begins on period day 1. On day 3, you go in and they usually will do a fasting blood, depending on what they're testing. Some clinics will do a fasting one, some won't. You should definitely ask and not assume that it's not fasting, because depending on what they're checking, will determine like whether you should fast for it or not. I would hate for you to go in there on that morning and you didn't fast and then they're like, sorry, like that would suck. You'd have to wait till the next cycle. It would be really annoying. My doctor was specifically concerned with AMH and FSH levels on day 3. One is day 3 specific, one can be done any day on your cycle. I can't remember. They just do it at the same time because it's easier. The reason for testing both of these hormones is that they can give you insight into your ovarian reserve, which is how many eggs do you have left approximately. It's not an exact science. Oh, estrogen was the other one. Okay, so your AMH, your estrogen level, and your FSH on that point of your cycle can give you a little bit of insight along with an antral follicle count on what they're looking at. Do you have diminished ovarian reserve? Do you have PCOS? Are you somewhere in the normal range? These are all things that they're gonna wanna know before they make a game plan for you. When I first started working with this clinic, I actually had up-to-date blood work that I had done on my own at home through Modern Fertility. I did do a video on this. It was not sponsored, but I did a video like doing my blood work and talking about the results in one of my previous cycle vlogs, one that didn't work out. It was like a year ago. Jeez Louise, more than a year ago. And all my levels were normal, like A+ level. Like he was super impressed with everything. He was like, you know, you're an unexplained fertility patient. Like there's nothing wrong with you. Obviously you're not getting pregnant, so something's going on. We'll figure it out, but like there's nothing wrong with your hormones. Fast forward a very long time, and here we are working with them, and the 1-year mark from that blood work comes up. And my doctor is like, we need to do updated day 3 blood work on you. My FSH was great. It was a 7. It was a 7 a year ago and a 7 now, so that was great. My estrogen was great. It was nice and low. I think it was in the 20s, and it was like that a year ago as well. But my AMH plummeted. So it went from a 3.01, which is an NG over ML. I know other countries do it like PMOL if you're going to convert it. So 3.01, which is great. But 1 year later, my current number is a 1.3, which is still in the normal range. 1 to 3 is normal. You don't want to get too high because then you get into PCOS territory, and that has a whole slew of other issues. And if you're lower than a 1, then you are considered a diminished ovarian reserve patient, which is not what you want to hear at age 33. So 1.3 was pretty alarming for me. And in fact, I went ahead and went online and ordered a second Modern Fertility test because I wanted to just test it again. I'm not gonna say I didn't trust the result because I trust the lab, but I was like, this is a big drop for 1 year. This is not a normal drop, especially at my age. So I ordered another Modern Fertility test and did it on my next cycle's day 3 blood work. And that came back as a 1.4. So a little bit of fluctuation is normal. 1.3 to 1.4 is not alarming, but 3.0 to 1.4, 1.3, that is alarming in 1 year. And it did flag up on my Modern Fertility account as being an abnormal drop. It says on there, like, you're still in the normal range, no need to freak out, but this is a drop that's not typically seen in a year, especially for your age. That really, really scared me. And there are a couple of reasons why that might have happened. My ovaries might have been damaged in my ectopic emergency surgery. That is probably the biggest reason, to be honest. From what I have found out through my own research and through talking to my doctor and my dad, that is the most likely reason, which is so sad. When they did that surgery, they went ahead and looked at my ovaries. They did remove my left tube, but they looked at my ovaries and they said that they looked like they were in perfect health. And so that is so devastating to have a result like that come back. And it basically just hammered home the idea that IVF is the right step for us right now. Like literally on top of everything else we've been through, now my ovaries are like potentially damaged. Maybe they aren't working as well. I don't know if that number will go up with time or if it's kind of permanently low. I haven't really been able to find a lot of scientific studies. There was one that I found that said that AMH levels plummet after a laparoscopy. Is that how you say it? Which is what my ectopic was. I mean, they removed the tube when they were in there too, but I couldn't find any information on how long that lasts or if it's permanent or if it's not. So if you have more information on that, I would love to know in a comment below, or if you find any studies, or if you are a doctor or a nurse, or if you have been through this. It definitely scared me. My doctor wasn't super concerned. He was like, you know, a 1.3, 1.4 is still fine. Yes, it's a little low compared to what you were a year ago. It's a little bit alarming. It's something we should look out for, but your estrogen and your FSH are great, and you don't have really any other like alarming infertility things that we're looking at. So we're just gonna keep an eye on it. Okay, I actually thought that I was gonna have enough time to film this whole video. I filmed another video portion before this, but this is James's nap time and I hear him waking up. And so I'm gonna have to go and make this video. I'll put it in one video, but I'm gonna have to film the rest of it like in a different sitting, which I don't think I've like ever done before, but I need to go. I'll be back. Hi guys. Okay, it's actually the next day. I'm sorry, yesterday got away from me. I can't remember the last time I sat down to film a sit-down video and had to break it into 2 days like that, but life just got crazy yesterday. So here I am. I quickly rewatched all the footage I filmed yesterday so that I can try to pick up exactly where I left off. So I'm gonna get right into it. The next very important piece of information that a clinic is gonna look at is your partner's sperm analysis. So your partner also has to get checked. It's very important to check out both partners in the infertility scenario because this is lesser known, I feel like, but 50% of infertility problems come from the man. That makes sense, you know, 50% from each, but I feel like a lot of times people think infertility is always the woman, but that is just not true. There are a lot of things that could be going on with the man's side of things, and there are also fixes to some of those issues. So there are medications that they can take, there are supplements they can take. In our case, Alex was picture perfect, so we knew that it wasn't coming from his side. Now, the paternal triploidy chromosomal abnormality we had was a sperm issue, but it wasn't unhealthy sperm. It was 2 sperms got into the egg, which is not normal. And it was a complete fluke. So even though it was paternal in origin, it wasn't actually anything about the sperm being wrong. And his sperm analysis was perfect, so that wasn't our issue. There are a lot of issues that a sperm analysis can show. They look at several things. It's not just the amount of sperm in your sample, it's how many of them are shaped in the correct way, how many of them are swimming forward the way they should and not around and around in circles. There's different things that they look at, and all together they tell you whether your analysis looks good or not. In our case, it was fine, so we moved on. One thing I wanted to say is just like modern fertility, where you can do your blood work at home without even working with a clinic just to see if you're normal, you can also do a sperm analysis from home where you actually will send in your sample. There's a few companies that do it. You can look it up. I think one is called Fellow. I see them on Facebook sometimes. It must be like because I search for infertility things, but there are ones where you can actually send in a sample and they will email you your results. So again, if you're just kind of trying to figure it out on your own without going to a clinic yet, just to see if there are any obvious issues with either of you, you can do that from the comfort of your home and not even have to go to a doctor's office. The third piece of diagnostic testing that was required before doing any sort of IUI or IVF at my clinic was a carrier screening, a genetic carrier screening. This actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I do think that you were given the option to opt out and not do the screening, but you had to sign a consent form saying that you had opted out of this information, because if you opt out of it and then you do something like IVF and you find out after paying all that money that you have an issue, you know, they want to be covered, that they told you that you might have an issue that you need to find out about beforehand. And for Alex and I, we wanted all of the information we could have. So we were happy to do the genetic screening. And it was just blood work from both of us. So we sat down, we each got a vial of blood taken and they sent it off. In this testing, they checked several hundred genetic issues to see if you either have it or you're a carrier of it that specifically can affect fertility. So it can affect whether you get pregnant, or it can affect whether you can stay pregnant once you get pregnant. So it's not testing for every single thing that exists, and it certainly isn't even testing for all of the deadly things that exist. It's specifically testing for things that would affect your ability to get or stay pregnant. So in our case, we got our results back. Alex was perfect, of course. This is a pattern, you'll see. He is not a carrier, nor does he have anything they tested for. For me, I actually had 2 things flagged up. Both of them are minor in the scheme of things, and we don't think either of them are actually an issue in my case. The first one is I am a carrier for something called hemochromatosis. It's something to do with iron in your blood, but I'm just a carrier for it. I don't actually have it. And that particular one, because I'm a carrier and I don't have, I think if I'm a carrier and Alex was a carrier, then it would maybe be an issue, but because he wasn't and I am, they decided that one was not an issue. The second one I actually do have, so I'm not just a carrier, but I only have 1 copy of the gene. And so I only got it from 1 parent, and it is called factor V Leiden, and it is a blood clotting disorder. Now, if you only have 1 copy of the gene, you're at a increased risk of having it from the general population that doesn't have a copy of the gene, but you're at a much lower risk than someone who has 2 copies of the genes, a copy from each parent. And in my case, because I've never had a blood clot and I have had a pregnancy which went to term and resulted in a healthy baby with no issues, not even knowing about this, the chances of it actually like flaring up in me and showing up in me is very, very low. But because we know about it now, he did want to go ahead and preventatively treat me for it with a daily baby aspirin, which is not something I was on with my pregnancy with James. That pregnancy, like I said, was healthy, went to term. James is a healthy baby, thank goodness. So it wasn't an issue, and because it wasn't an issue in a previous pregnancy, they don't think that it will be. But a daily baby aspirin is an easy thing for me to take in order to just be sure. And honestly, they recommend baby aspirin for a lot of infertility patients, even ones without a copy of a blood clotting disorder. We do know that my paternal triploidy loss and my ectopic loss were not anything to do with blood clots. They were both complete flukes of other sorts, and they did not have anything to do with the factor V Leiden. It's good that we know the cause of both of those losses because we don't have to look back and wonder. For instance, not so much with the ectopic because that one we surgically removed, but the other one, if we hadn't tested it after the fact, we might have wondered, like I wonder if there was something, a blood clot in the placenta that was developing or something. But we do know that that wasn't the case. So I am on a daily baby aspirin, and then with my ectopic pregnancy, when that pregnancy started going downhill in terms of my betas were doing weird things and we hadn't found the pregnancy yet via ultrasound, we did not know that it was ectopic at that point. He did put me on an injection called Lovenox. This was done to give that baby that was trying to grow in me the absolute best chance. We did not know it was ectopic. We thought it was a struggling pregnancy. The betas were going up. They were going up at a slightly slower rate than they should be, which is a warning sign for ectopic. And then it also had a huge jump at one point and like fixed itself. It righted itself. Again, is a sign of an ectopic, but an ectopic pregnancy, the risk, the percentage of risk for me was under 1%. That definitely wasn't like the number one thing that we thought was going on. We thought it was a struggling pregnancy. And so I was put on Lovenox to help support that pregnancy along with a lot of progesterone. Lovenox is a daily injection in your stomach that you're given throughout the entire pregnancy, all 9 months. And I do believe that right before delivery, they switch you to heparin, and then you stay on it for like 6 weeks after the birth as well. And it just makes sure that you have no blood clots, little mini micro blood clots forming in any part of your placenta, any of your blood vessels, your uterus, and that your baby is not being stilted by your blood like clotting up. Again, it's probably not a high risk in my case because I have had a pregnancy go to term, but it's just preventative at this point. And especially with that pregnancy, we didn't really know what was going on with it. And it was one of those things that was like, this could help. It might not, but it could. And so I don't know moving forward if I'm going to be put on Lovenox for future pregnancies. I do know that it is a pretty common preventative thing to be put on, even if you only have one copy of Factor V Leiden. So if we do end up getting pregnant through IVF, I'm probably likely going to be put on it again. I'll be honest, I hope I don't, because it was the most painful injection. I think giving it to myself has prepped me moving into IVF, because I hear those injections hurt too, but I do have practice with injecting myself in my stomach every night, and that was not an easy injection. It stung, it bruised my stomach, the needle felt big. Again, it might not be as bad as some of the IVF medications, I don't know yet, but I do at least have a little bit of practice. So I'm kind of looking at that as a good thing, and I don't know if I'm going to be put on that again. Okay, so those are the three main things that your clinic is probably going to test you for before doing any sort of treatment. Your day 3 labs, your sperm analysis, and your carrier screening, unless you opt out of it. Those 3 things we did before my first IUI cycle. So we did that when we first started working with the clinic. I will say there was one more test that we had done before my IUI, and it was called a Hydrosonogram. And what it is you go in and you have an internal ultrasound done. Mine was like day 5 or day 7 of my cycle, so it was after my period started, but before I ovulated. They put a catheter through your cervix into your uterus, and the same exact thing happens during an IUI, so it's a little bit of a practice. And then they push saline solution up into your uterus and into your tubes, and they're looking on ultrasound, and they can see whether you have any abnormalities in there. So I can't remember exactly what they're looking for, but I know they can like make sure that your tubes are nice and open, and they can also see if there's anything wrong with like the textural inside of your uterus, like fibroids and polyps. They can just kind of see it a little bit better than just having it be empty. And if they do see anything that they think might be an issue, then you have the next step up of testing, which is where you actually go to an x-ray, like a radiology place, and they do an x-ray where they put dye up there and they can see it a lot clearer. But luckily for me, everything looked good, and so I didn't have to do the x-ray test. My doctor did say that before we transfer any embryos, if we're lucky enough to get any during IVF, I will need to do an updated hydrosonogram, because they like to do them every 6 months that you're getting treatment. And my last one was in September or October before my first IUI. So that was all the testing that was required to move forward with at least the IUI portion. I don't know if there's more testing they require specifically for IVF, if that's what you're starting with. I did have more testing done in between my IUI and IVF, because there was a lot of questions I had after I had my triploidy loss, and I requested that we do a karyotyping, and my doctor requested that we do my full recurrent pregnancy loss testing, which is the lupus anticoagulant panel. I think there might be a couple of other blood work tests they do specifically for recurrent pregnancy loss, because at that point we had my triploidy loss and we had chemical pregnancy. We hadn't had my ectopic yet, but I was like, this is too many losses, you know? And so, yeah, we did do some more testing. So our karyotyping is both normal. Alex and I, we both came back normal, which means we don't have any sort of translocation. I don't really know a lot of the science behind it. I think if one of us had come back abnormal, I would have learned a lot more about it. You'll have to look it up. It's a little bit confusing. All I know is that ours is normal, and so we don't need to do any sort of genetic testing that's going to screen for the translocation. And also, because of our carrier screening, we don't need to do the specific gene disorder testing. We're just going to do like the general PGTA testing. And then my lupus anticoagulant panel and all my recurrent pregnancy loss ones also came back normal. What we learned from all of our testing is we are normal. I mean, ultimately, like, our infertility issues are not because of anything, and we have been classified as an unexplained infertility couple, which is the most frustrating kind, because on one hand, it's almost the most hopeful kind because you don't have anything obviously wrong, but on the other hand, it's like if you knew something was wrong, you could maybe try to fix it. So it was frustrating. I think I'm still classified as unexplained, although since then I've had an ectopic pregnancy and I've lost my dominant tube. And so I think that I would be considered tubal factor now, but I still am, my paperwork still says unexplained infertility. So maybe because I have one tube still, it's not tubal. I don't really know how that works. Yeah, so that's our diagnosis and all of our stats. And so my AMH plummeting is a little worrisome, but again, it might be because of the laparoscopic surgery. I'm 1 tube down now, so it's less likely that I'll get pregnant on my own. And, you know, on top of that, we've just had issues for over 2 years. You know, we've either not gotten pregnant or we've gotten pregnant and lost the pregnancy in various ways. It's frustrating to just be told, like, we have no idea why you're not getting pregnant. You should be at this point. Like, you should have been able to have a pregnancy without these horrible, like, other things happening, like the 2 losses I had this year. So that was all of the testing that I had to have in my prep time. Like I said, mine was several months long. Part of that is because I had to be scheduled for an IVF class. And at my clinic, this is a requirement for both you and your husband, you and your partner, and they only allow a certain amount of couples per class, and they only have a certain amount of classes. And because I was trying to schedule mine right when all of the teachers were getting off for the summer, this is literally what I was told. A lot of teachers who are gonna do IVF have to do it over the summer, which makes complete sense. So a lot of the classes were actually really booked up during that time. So we did have to wait a little while to get into our class. And the class was about an hour and a half long. It was, I think, like 5 couples, and it was over a Zoom call, so we could see the other couples. I know that they used to do it in person at the clinic, but now it's over Zoom because of COVID. In this class, they went over everything from start to finish in terms of teaching you about basic IVF. So it teaches you all the steps, what the scheduling will look like, what your appointments will look like. It doesn't go over each individual medication protocol because everyone's different, but it went over kind of like the main stuff that everyone's gonna have. Like, you're gonna do this, and then you're gonna do this, and you're gonna have these appointments on these days, and all of this. And it also went into a lot of the science behind exactly each step of the process in the lab, like what is happening to your embryos the day that you retrieve it, and the next day, and the next day. And it also went over the science behind ICSI and PGT testing. And so if you were still kind of on the fence on whether you wanted to do that, we knew that we had already signed up for it. So we did pay attention to that just to like learn a little bit more about it. And then at the end, we had some time where we could do like questions and answers with the nurse. If we had any specific questions, Alex had questions on the injections. He's very nervous about giving me injections. Probably will just end up doing them myself, to be honest, because he's very nervous about it. But there were a lot of questions asked. One person was asking specifically about like desiring multiple, like a multiples pregnancy, and the nurse said that like they are pretty strict. They don't usually let you do 2 embryos. Definitely not if they're PGS tested, unless you're like over a certain age or you have under a certain, like it's very specific, but for the most part, they like to just do 1 embryo. They like to reduce the chance of multiples as much as possible because it's riskier for the baby and for you. And then the last thing that we had to do as far as our prep requirements is we had to have a consent meeting. This was basically like having a will drawn up for your embryos. It is a legally binding contract that either has to be notarized or it has to be signed in front of a witness from the clinic. That's the route that we ended up taking. And you have to make all sorts of decisions about your embryos and what you want done with them in the case of a simultaneous death between you and your partner. Do you want to leave them in the custody of someone else to make the decisions, or do you want them donated to science? Do you want them destroyed? Same thing for if you get divorced with your partner. Are you going to have the embryos be, you know, are you going to leave the embryos with one of the partners, or do you want it to be destroyed or donated to science at that point? What happens if one partner dies and the other one doesn't? What do you want done in that case? So those are hard questions. You don't want to think about those things, but it makes sense that they make you make these decisions because it's a very important thing. And in our case, like, we are both very against them being destroyed for any reason and donated to science. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we did, for all of the answers, we left someone in charge of the embryos, and that's the decision that we made together. And so there's also decisions on whether your embryos can be used in the case that you die. You know, if Alex passed away and I still wanted to have more babies of his babies, does he give me permission to have his babies still? So those are very personal questions between you and your partner, and they're questions that you don't want to have to think about, but you have to, and you have to sign and agree, and you know, it's very official. So there was all of that, the consent meeting. I think that was probably the heaviest part of everything. The last thing was we met with our financial coordinator and went over all of the pricing and the cost for all of the things that we decided to do in terms of the PGT testing and the ICSI, which are both add-on cost. We are completely out of pocket. We do not have insurance coverage for IVF, which is very common in America, and it's very sad because it's so freaking expensive. I know that there are a few states that do require that insurance companies at least give you the option to have coverage on infertility, but Tennessee is not one of them. Alex and I have really great insurance. We pay a lot of money for our insurance, and to have it cover nothing except diagnostic testing for infertility hurts a lot. So we are out of pocket. Luckily, our clinic has a flat rate for people paying that don't have insurance coverage. Looking across at a lot of the best clinics across the country, we made sure that we weren't paying a crazy amount compared to what the going rate is. And we actually feel like we're paying a pretty normal to maybe even slightly lower than normal rate at a very good clinic. So we're happy. I mean, I'm not happy that it's so expensive, but I'm happy that I feel like we're paying a fair price for what the going rate is for IVF in America if you don't have insurance for it. So yeah, it would be nice to have a job that had infertility coverage, but we're both self-employed, so it's not really a thing unless your state requires it to be an option, which Tennessee doesn't, so there's that. I've read some stories of people literally moving states in order to get a job in a state that does have coverage for it, because that's how expensive it is. And there are people who switch jobs in order to have jobs that will cover it in the job health insurance. I know Starbucks apparently has infertility health insurance if you work there for I think 5 months, and you can even be part-time on it, which I think is amazing. That is so good of them. Good for you, Starbucks. For having that. But as a self-employed couple living in Tennessee, we do not have coverage for it. So that stinks. If you have any questions after watching this video, leave them in a comment below, and that way I can go through that as well before filming the next part and see if there are any other questions. My cat is scratching at the door, and that is my cue to wrap up this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you again, Ritual, for sponsoring another video of mine. Love working with you. You guys are being great on my body right now. And yeah, I will see you guys with my next video. Goodbye.